everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Jen Welch, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Director of International Student Enrollment. Welcome to our session. We have a great group of faculty who will introduce themselves and share about curriculum, school culture, and exciting things they're doing in their classrooms, with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Their Academy has worked hard over the past few months to review and update our policies, language, and best practices. Just recently, Thayer Academy shared a new strategic plan for racial equity and justice, which can be found directly on our website under Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. To be an anti-racist institution is a school-wide responsibility. From the Board of Trustees to the head of school, to parents and families, students, faculty, staff, and alumni. We are committed to making every student feel welcomed, supported, and safe when they are part of this special community. We have a number of student-run organizations in both the middle and upper school, such as Spectrum, the Gay Straight Alliance, ISOCON, the Black Affinity Group, Asian Culture Club, and Omega, Thayer's Diversity Club. The Omega clubs discuss a wide range of topics around social justice, current events, identity, and other diversity-related topics. Another area I wanted to talk about are ways we are supporting the community as we engage in conversations around diversity. This summer, our entire faculty and staff read Debbie Irving's book, Waking Up White. We were also fortunate to have a Zoom session with Irving herself, where we talked about our diverse identities and experiences and how that impacts our community. Thayer also was one of the sponsors for the National Anti-Racist Teaching Conference, which was held virtually this summer. With this sponsorship, it allowed for everyone in our community to attend for free. Notable speakers included Dr. Ibram Kendi, Dr. Joy DeGruy, and Austin Channing Brown. Our families have a vested interest in being part of these critical conversations, and we are proud to host speakers and share ways in which this dialogue continues throughout the year. Another area I'm happy to talk about is our international program. We currently have 19 students that attend Thayer from China, Vietnam, and Hong Kong. Some of these students are still overseas and learning remotely, even with a 12-hour time difference. Many of these students have moved to the US with a family member, and some students live with host families that Thayer recruits and manages. The international program has helped to broaden our global awareness and understanding of different perspectives and cultures. At the end of this session, we will share our contact information in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I look forward to meeting you all sometime soon in person and hopefully on campus. And now I'm going to pass it over to my friend, Brandon Odom.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen. And hello again to everyone tuning in. I had an opportunity to speak a little bit earlier in the program, but I'll introduce myself. My name is Brandon Odom, and I'm an Associate Director of Admissions and also an Upper School Assistant Dean of Students. As I mentioned earlier in my remarks, it is so important that there is committed to creating a school culture that is inclusive of all of its community members. On the heels and following up on a series of much needed, hard, difficult conversations this past spring and summer regarding race and racial injustice, we have instituted strategies that we feel will foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our school culture. You'll hear more about one of those aspects from an academic lens a little bit later in this portion. The work of DEI as it relates to school culture is to, one, help students learn about themselves and various aspects of their own identities. And secondly, encourage students to learn about their classmates and the various communities and backgrounds in which they come from. And lastly, to help build meaningful relationships with students, teachers, and parents and families. Furthermore, another key aspect of school cultural expectation is that every student should expect respect. One of the most exciting parts of my job is that I get to work with some of the school's student leaders on campus. And just the other day, we were brainstorming ways in which we can, as a community, continue to spread awareness and messages of anti-discrimination to the entire school body. And with the newly formed and created Anti-Discrimination Committee, which will handle reported cases of discrimination and/or hate speech, we want our students to feel empowered to stand up for what is right and redirect or report discriminatory and other inappropriate behavior. And as Jen mentioned a little bit earlier, we do offer affinity spaces for both students and faculty. And for me, as one of the faculty advisors to ISOCON, an affinity space for students who identify as Black or African American, my role is to assist in helping students facilitate events, meetings meant to educate, enlighten, and uplift not only Thayer's Black student community, but the community at large. Along with that, students are able to participate in community service projects, fundraise, and provide those funds to worthy causes and organizations in whom they believe in. And one of our major goals as a community is for our students and our faculty, staff, and all who make up this special community is to bring with them their authentic selves to Thayer each day. And we want our community to recognize the beauty and the power in a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, one in which all have a sense of belonging. And with that, I'd like to pass the program over to Mr. Dunn, Matt Dunn, who I've had the pleasure of collaborating with on a few classes with.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here and to have a chance to talk with you all about some of the efforts that we're doing in the curriculum. My name is Matt Dunn. I'm in the history department. I want to apologize from the outset for my voice. I had surgery recently and it interrupted my vocal cords, but they're on their way back. And I think I sound a lot worse than I feel. I am a longtime member of the Thayer faculty. I was here for 19 years as a history teacher, history department head, and director of studies. And very recently, I was asked to return and work with 3 other colleagues at Thayer to develop an anti-racism and social justice course. And I was thrilled to do that. We made a lot of progress over that summer, and we introduced that course this fall. In the history department, all the history classes developed a unit on the Black Lives Matter movement to look at the purposes and the efforts of that movement, and also the historic racism that the movement is trying to combat. To have that unit for all of our history classes, I think set a tone for other issues about race and racism that those classes will explore over the course of the year. In our anti-racism course, we are currently working with all of our juniors and seniors. We meet with them once a week. We've been talking about issues of identity, race, and white privilege. We've looked at how race and racism have been playing out in our country, in our communities over the past year or so. We've dug into the history of racism, and we've looked at some of the issues that we've experienced at Thayer itself. Some of the things that really have been remarkable is the community contributions to this effort. We have 6 different faculty from various departments that are teaching the class. We have community contributions from a number of different departments for various units of the class. Mr. Odom has been a featured speaker on a few of those efforts, and I'm so thankful to him. But really, I think the demonstration is that this is a community concern, a community effort. And I have to say that I am so excited about this concept of anti-racism. As Mr. Odom mentioned, this idea of empowering our students to build our community has such strength. And anti-racism, I think, as a concept is such an empowering idea. And that's how we're promoting it. I think for our Black students, they are seeing that there is a large portion of the community increasingly aware of some of the hardships they have faced and committed to changing that. For our white students, I think we are recognizing that sometimes we can live in a bubble, and when we look outside that bubble, we see some injustices that we don't want to have happen. So I really do think that we're touching on a number of students in a number of different ways and powerful ways as we go through this effort. And I do have to say that we're going to work with our freshmen and sophomores in the second semester, so the whole upper school will have exposure to this course. And now I'll pass it off to Alan Lodge, who can talk about some of the things she's doing specifically in her classroom.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Alan Lodge. I'm a foreign language teacher, this year teaching Spanish 3 and Spanish 4. And I want to talk about the way that I and other teachers are integrating DEI work into the natural curriculum that we have going in our courses. To some extent, this is work that I was already doing or that other teachers were already doing, but with this push this year to really connect different threads, connect different dots, my main focus has been trying to make visible for my students some of my own thought processes around how I curate materials for them and what sort of essential questions I'm bringing to each unit. So I primarily teach through short stories. Students engage with the Spanish language by reading texts that have different characters and figures and that touch on different themes. And I started the year by talking to students about how their own identities and their own experiences are naturally going to influence the way that they connect with a certain character or respond to a different theme. And to some extent, our identities and our experiences influence the way we interact with one another in the classroom. And I was fortunate to be able to work with one of Thayer's DEI consultants on just really making sure that I was starting off the year right in the way that I showed my students that, these are habits of mind. This is the way that we're going to approach our stories and our texts and our investigation of culture in Spanish class. So a first exercise that we did was something called Siete Círculos. It was getting students to draw 7 circles that touched on different parts of their identity. And that was sort of a private exercise for them. But then in class, I encouraged them to share 3 of those identifiers. And questions that I asked to go along with this investigation of personal identity was, what is something you just wish people would stop saying about one piece of your identity? Or what is something that you have a lot of orgullo, a lot of pride about? And it just opened up the classroom to a lot of interesting conversation. And as Matt mentioned, I think it set the right tone at the start of the year for students to see that, this is work that's happening all around. This is part of my learning, thinking about the way that I interact with different people or different topics. Another question that I have been posing to my student after we read a story is whose voices are being left out. So we'll look at who the author of a text is, that person's background, who the protagonist of a story is, and then who do you still need to hear from? Whose voice, what source do you need in order to feel like you really have a grasp of this particular topic or idea? And most recently, we were talking about the immigrant experience, the experience of a Cuban immigrant to Spain. And so a student in my class raised his hand and said, well, I would want to know where other immigrants are coming from, other immigrants to Spain are coming from. Is Cuba a major immigrant population? What's making up the fabric of Spanish society? And someone else said, I want to know what it's like to be a minority in Spain. So if most people are of European descent, what is that experience like? And so I went home and found some articles in the local paper and some video resources, and it opened up the conversation in a new way. And I think some students responded like, I thought in the United States, I thought it was just us that was really having this reckoning with race and structural inequality, but it brought in that global perspective that really as a global society, I think we're looking at these issues. So it was a great teaching moment for me to just have that sense of collaboration, to bring the right question to a class and have what I wanted to teach become all the more richer because of that. So I too am excited about this work and feel fortunate to be collaborating both with my students and my colleagues. So I'll kick it back to Jen to close off this session.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks to all of our panelists this morning. We are so glad that you are here today, and we have a attached in the link, the landing page. So you can head back to the landing page to attend one more session. All of our contact information is also in inclusion, and the Director of International Student Enrollment. Welcome to our session this morning. We have a great group of faculty who will introduce themselves and share about curriculum, school culture, and exciting things they are doing in their classrooms with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thayer Academy has worked hard over the past 4 months to review and update our policies, language, and best practices. Just recently, Thayer Academy shared a new strategic plan for racial equity and justice, which can be found directly on our website under diversity, equity, and inclusion. To be an anti-racist institution is a school-wide responsibility. From the Board of Trustees to the head of school, to parents, families, students, faculty, and staff, and alumni. We are committed to making every student feel welcomed, supported, and safe when they are part of this special community. We have a number of student-run organizations in both the middle and upper school, such as Spectrum, the Gay Straight Alliance, ISOCON, the Black Affinity Group, Asian Culture Club, and Omega, Thayer's Diversity Club. The Omega clubs discuss a wide range of topics around social justice, current events, identity, and other diversity-related topics. Another area I wanted to talk about are ways we are supporting the community as we engage in conversations around diversity. This summer, our entire faculty and staff read Debbie Irving's book, Waking Up White, and we were also fortunate to have a Zoom session with Irving herself, where we talked about our diverse identities and experiences and how that impacts our community. Thayer also was one of the sponsors for the National Anti-Racist Teaching Conference, which was held virtually this summer. With this sponsorship, it allowed for everyone in our community to attend for free. Notable speakers included Dr. Ibram Kendi, Dr. Joy DeGrew, and Austin Channing Brown. Our families have a vested interest in being part of these critical conversations, and we are proud to host speakers and share ways in which this dialogue can continue throughout the year. Another area I'm happy to speak about is our international program. We currently have 19 students that attend Thayer from China, Vietnam, and Hong Kong. Some of these students are still overseas and are learning remotely, even with a 12-hour time difference. Many of these students have moved to the US with a family member, and some students live with host families that Thayer recruits and manages. The international program has helped to broaden our global awareness and understanding of different perspectives and cultures. At the end of this session, we will share our contact information in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to any one of us. I look forward to meeting you all sometime soon in person and hopefully on campus. I am now going to pass it over to my friend, Brandon Odom.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. And hello again to everyone tuning in. I had the pleasure of speaking a little bit earlier in the program, but I'll introduce myself again. My name is Brandon Odom, and I'm an Associate Director of Admissions and the Upper School Assistant Dean of Students. And in my remarks a little bit earlier, I mentioned how important it was that Thayer is committed to creating a school culture that is inclusive of all of its community members. And following a series of much needed, hard and difficult conversations this past spring and summer regarding race and racial injustice, we have instituted strategies that will foster true diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our school culture. You'll hear more about one of those aspects from an academic lens a little bit later in the session. But the work of DEI as it relates to school culture is to, one, help students learn about themselves and various aspects of their own identities. And secondly, encourage students to learn about their classmates and the various communities and backgrounds that they come from. And lastly, to help build meaningful relationships with students, teachers, parents, and families. And furthermore, another key aspect of school cultural expectations is that every student should expect respect. And one of the most exciting parts of my job is that I get to work with some of the student leaders on campus. And just the other day, we were brainstorming ways in which we can continue to spread awareness and various messages of anti-discrimination to the entire school body. And with a newly formed and created anti-discrimination committee, which will handle reported cases of discrimination, hate speech, we really want our students to feel empowered to stand up for what is right, and redirect and report discriminatory and other inappropriate behaviors as they see them. As Jen mentioned earlier, we do offer affinity spaces for both students and faculty. And for me, as one of the faculty advisors for ISOCON, an affinity space for students who identify as Black or African American, and ISOCON also means, it's a Nigerian word for unity. My role is to assist in helping students facilitate events and meetings, which are meant to educate, enlighten, and uplift not only Thayer's Black student community, but the community at large. And along with that, students are able to participate in community service projects, fundraise, and provide those funds to worthy causes and organizations whom they believe in. And one of our major goals as a community is for our students and faculty, staff, and all who make up our special communities to bring their authentic selves to Thayer each day. We really want our community to recognize the beauty and the power in a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. And we really want all of our community members to have a sense of belonging. And with that, I'll pass the program over to Mr. Dunn, who I've had the pleasure of collaborating with. I've also, as a teaching fellow, I was able to observe a lot of his classes. So Mr. Dunn.
Brandon, thank you. Good morning. My name is Matt Dunn. I'm in the history department. At the outset, I want to apologize for my voice. I had surgery recently and my vocal cords are still recovering, but I will do the best I can. I'm very happy to be here and to continue on what Jen and Brandon have mentioned. I don't think there's anything more important to us than to work to make sure that every one of our students feels that they belong at the Thayer community. I was at Thayer for 19 years as a history teacher, lacrosse coach, department head, and director of studies. And I was recently invited back to work with 3 colleagues over the summer to design an anti-racism and social justice course. I was thrilled to do that. I am so happy to be back at Thayer. And I am excited to be involved in some of the really important curricular initiatives that are focusing on issues of diversity and anti-racism. I'd like to share at the start that in our history department, the history teachers designed a course, a set of classes focusing on the Black Lives Matter movement, its purposes and its goals, along with a history of racism. Those classes happen in all of our history classes at the start of the year, and they will again in the second semester. I know those classes were really successful and set up opportunities to look at issues of race and racism as they play out in the rest of the curriculum in those history courses. In the anti-racism course that we're teaching, we have 6 different faculty from various departments that are currently working with juniors and seniors this semester to talk about anti-racism. We will be working with all the freshmen and sophomores in the second semester. So the entire upper school will be exposed to these concepts. And at the start, we were digging into how race and racism have been playing out in our country in the last year or so, and then looking at the history that has developed and sort of perpetuated racism in so many different ways. And most recently, we were looking at how racism has existed at Thayer. I think the awareness that we're spreading has been so important for all of our students. I think for our Black students, they have seen that this is a community that sees them, that hears them, that supports them. For our white students, I think there's an important recognition of changes, a recognition of sometimes the bubbles that we can live in and that we need to break down if we're really going to be supportive of everyone in our community. One really powerful aspect of this course will be that will be a project that every student develops to help think about how we can bring anti-racism in real ways to the community. I think that what we're seeing is that the administration has to be involved in this effort. Faculty needs to be involved in this effort. Students have to be involved in this effort. And we are really committed to making there an anti-racist community. And I think that's showing in the curricular initiatives that we have developed. So I'll pass it on now to Alan Lodge, who can talk about some of the efforts that she's been promoting in her own class. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan Lodge. I'm a foreign language teacher. I teach this year Spanish 3 and Spanish 4. And as Matt mentioned, I want to share with you the ways that I am weaving diversity, equity, and inclusion work into the already existing curriculum. This is something that many of us, myself included, were already thinking about, but I think this year with this community-wide effort to connect certain dots, to create a common language around anti-racist work, to create a common knowledge base around what structural inequality is. One of my goals is just to make my thinking and my course planning visible to my students. So the types of resources that I pick for them, the types of essential questions that I ask them, I'm looping them into that process. And I was so fortunate to be able to collaborate at the start of the school year with one of our outside consultants who is helping teachers develop these types of assignments and units in their classes. And he helped me develop a first activity in my class that I'm going to share with you. But first, I'll just say that I primarily teach through short stories. So students are engaging with the Spanish language by reading and coming into contact with characters and figures from throughout the Spanish-speaking world. Some of the stories touch on important events in different countries or themes. And so I started the year talking to my students about how our own identities and our own life experiences will naturally influence the way we connect to a certain character or figure, the way that we respond to a certain topic, and to some extent, the ways that we interact with one another in the classroom and the ways that the students interact with and respond to me. So I did this exercise called Siete Círculos, and students were asked to draw 7 circles and pick from a list of social identifiers that I gave them in Spanish, 7 things that really fit with their identity at this moment in time. And that was a private exercise for them. But then for homework, they shared, or they did that for homework, and then in class, they shared 3. And I asked questions of them like, what is something that you just wish someone would stop saying about one of the pieces of your identity? Or what is a thing that you're really proud of, that you have orgullo, pride about? And the conversation opened up in a lot of unexpected directions, and I think set a wonderful tone for my course, which is that this work is part and parcel of all sorts of learning. It's not just something that I'm doing in the anti-racism course, but I'm going to bring this habit of mine and this critical approach to every text and all the conversations that I interact with. And so one recent question that I've been asking of my students is, whose voice is left out? So after we read a story, considering who the author is, considering who the protagonist is, and then saying, who do I still need to hear from in order to feel like I have a better understanding of this theme or this idea. And most recently, we were looking at an immigrant story, a Cuban boy who had immigrated to Spain. And I posed this question to my students, and a boy said, well, I want to know about what the immigrant makeup is like in Spain. And then another student said, well, I want to know what it's like in Spain if you're non-white, if you're not of European descent. And so then I went back home and I looked on El País, the main newspaper in Madrid, and I discovered an article that I didn't know existed and a video series, and I brought that back into class. And for my students, a common reaction was like, whoa, I just thought in the United States we were really having this reckoning with race right now. I didn't realize that this was happening in other cultures, other countries as well. And so I think it helped provide a global perspective for them. I think it helped show them that this is something that's really gathering momentum, and it excited them to, I think, continue to pursue this work and to develop these habits of mind as they go through their education at Thayer. So it was a great moment for me. Like many of the panelists here, I'm feeling excited to just be collaborating with my students and with my colleagues and being part of this community effort. So with that, I will kick it back to Jen to close off our panel, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions about what's going on in my class.
Thank you all for being here today. We have included our information in the chat below, so feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have questions. We've also included the landing page, so you can head back to the landing page, and we will be closing out our open house for the morning. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you soon.